I will never say that again, however. Okay? Okay, thank you very much for joining us. We're going to have two presentations now on two issues that we've been talking about for some time, but two presentations that will be made to the Cabinet. One is on the I-287 project. 287 is a road in Westchester County, basically, that has been redeveloped by the state over a number of years. There are a number of reports about the delays, about the time, about the basic execution of 287. So we asked the Commissioner and Peter Lehrer to take a look at that project, see what we can learn from it, what worked, what didn't work, how can we make it better, and what lessons are there for us going forward. And with that, I will turn it over to Peter Lehrer first. Peter, you want to start, or is Joan going to start? Peter? By the way, thank you very much for Peter gets all the very difficult assignments. Peter helped us on the looking at the construction and renovation of the Capitol, and how do we expedite the renovation of the Capitol. As you know, OGS has been handling the renovation of the Capitol. It's gone on for many, many years. So long that it was threatening to take longer to renovate than to actually construct the Capitol. And Peter came in and spent a lot of time and came up with a revised plan on the renovation, and that worked very well. And then he was kind enough to also step up to the plate and help us with this project. With that, Peter Lehrer.
Thank you, Governor. Good morning, and good morning, Cabinet members. I'm pleased to appear before you this morning and very much appreciate the invitation to share the findings of our task force. We all believe that government should function as efficiently as possible. This report highlights lessons learned from the construction of 287 and recommendations for DOT to focus better on time and on-schedule performance. For the past decade, I-87 has suffered from rising costs and unexpected delays. In June of this year, the governor formed this task force to assess the problems and find solutions. I live in Westchester, and I know 287 is the most important roadway in that area. The construction took too long and cost too much. A little background on 287. It originally opened in 1960, but even at that time did not meet interstate standards. Over 15 years, the project was divided up into 6 phases. In 1994, the project was implemented to rehabilitate the roadway and bridges, as well as address safety and traffic issues. This was DOT's biggest project in the last decade. The project was designed into 6 different stages, as I mentioned, one at a time. As of today, only Project 8E remains unfinished. The project has suffered $78 million in cost overruns from 1996 through 2011. Over the past decade, repeated delays have pushed the project completion back by 3 years. The 6 stages shown above are listed in chronological order. DOT faced large overruns on 4 of these contracts, but Stage 3 was especially problematic. Stage 3 had $41 million in overruns, or nearly 29% over budget, with 72 change orders, which were the result of missed elements of work in the design numerous quantity miscalculations, utility relocation delays, and unknown geotech conditions. DOT has consistently had overruns on projects between 7 to 11%. Over the last 5 years, this has resulted in an additional $530 million. Given the complexity of road construction and site conditions in New York, some of these overruns are expected. There is no current mechanism for setting aside project contingencies for these problems. However, best-in-class state DOTs have achieved cost overruns that are often less than 5% of the capital program. In regard to schedule, nearly half of the DOT projects have been delayed up to a half a year. Projects of $25 million and greater have had delays of over 300 days. Best-in-class state DOT deliver their projects in the 80 to 90% range on time. Recommendations. First, DOT needs to better understand site conditions and required utility relocations before bidding. DOT should identify a high-level single point of contact at the various utility companies for managing the construction coordination. Second, DOT should consider the use of lump sum contracts for complex projects. Without this, DOT is assuming too much risk for price increases. Third, DOT should require detailed construction schedules to allow for constructability reviews during the design stage. DOT should also use independent third-party value engineering to ensure that the designs and the costs are appropriate. Fourth, DOT should engage independent experts to assist with the design of complex, large-scale projects. And finally, DOT needs to approve change orders in under 30 days at a minimum. On stage 3, some of the change orders have taken over a year to approve, and this has led to delays and additional costs. Additional recommendations to improve the way that DOT manages its capital program. We recommend that DOT increase its main office oversight here in Albany to place limits on district autonomy. DOT should have monthly meetings to review performance metrics and targets with regional offices. They need to establish a culture that being over budget and behind schedule is totally unacceptable. DOT should form a committee of high-level DOT leadership to review and approve all projects over $5 million to ensure that there is a need for the project and that it has a realistic implementation plan. DOT should consider a funding mechanism for statewide significant projects so that they receive appropriations outside of the regional funding formulas. This would allow for regions to tackle complex large projects in the most efficient and cost-effective manner without having to sacrifice their maintenance dollars. For example, 287 could have been done in fewer phases and would have been more efficient. DOT should select project managers and teams based on their skills required for the project. DOT should search across the state to identify its best managers to put on the most important projects. DOT should pursue accountability for design errors and omissions. This means implementing frequent reviews for the outside designers and contractors, as well as internal management, and DOT should provide training and opportunities to improve staff performance. Thank you, Governor, for the opportunity to work on this project, and I would now like to turn it over to Joan.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you to the independent review team for these important recommendations. Since taking office, Governor Cuomo has made it a priority to make government work more efficiently for the taxpayer, and he made it a priority for the Department of Transportation. Today is another step in this direction. As a result of these recommendations, DOT is transforming the way we manage construction projects across the state. First and foremost, based on Peter's recommendation, we have established a capital program delivery committee comprised of senior DOT employees to closely scrutinize the complexity and size of each project to ensure that the best designers and best project managers, both in-house and on a consultant basis, are used. We have begun holding monthly meetings to review the issues, coordinate communication, bringing together our partners in the utility companies and the industry to ensure that projects stay on schedule. We have brought on board expert consultants to analyze project designs as well as, per the recommendations, undertake value engineering, constructability reviews, and cost estimating to make sure that the construction work is feasible and managed in a way that is the most time and cost effective. Change order requests are now either accepted or rejected within a 2-week period, a process that, as Peter mentioned, had previously taken as long as a year. By making those decisions in a 2-week period, we force both the contractor and the project management team to stay on budget and on schedule. In addition to changing the way individual projects are handled, oh, did I go the wrong way again? Okay, sorry, thank you. In addition to changing the way projects are handled, we have taken historic steps to transform the way DOT is managed overall. Our monthly meetings with DOT senior staff and project managers review projects and performance. Over the next 2 weeks, we will be undertaking a very thorough analysis of the 2012 program and making those decisions as to where the most appropriate and best qualified staff are and which projects to move forward before the 2012 letting season. No large project over $5 million will be approved until the Capital Committee reviews and approves the budget and design. We are examining ways to redesign the funding process, working with DOB to better direct money to major projects on a statewide basis as opposed to just on a region-by-region basis. By looking across all regions when staffing projects, we will maximize the resources that we have and make sure that the most qualified project managers, both from in-house staff and from our consultants, are used for the right jobs. This will allow DOT regions, and DOT is an agency, to share staff with specific expertise with other regions, reducing the costs and ensuring that the project is in the best hands possible. We are currently in the process of implementing a revised performance review process to ensure that all DOT initiatives and projects meet the highest standards. Picking up on the recommendations of Peter and his team, with these transformative changes to DOT operations and management, we believe we can attain the goal and become one of the best-in-class state DOTs of 90% of projects delivered on time and no more than 5% overruns for all DOT projects. That is clearly a stretch goal, but it is a stretch goal that we are instituting within the agency. Additionally, all cost and schedule performance data will be available to the public via DOT's website, our new website to be launched in the near future, so that all the residents of the state can hold us accountable. As a result of these changes, under Governor Cuomo's leadership and with guidance from Peter and his team, I am pleased to announce that the Exit 8E project, which is the last component of the I-287 Cross Westchester Expressway project, will be substantially complete by December 2012 instead of August 2013. Thank you. I'd now like to turn things back over to Governor Cuomo.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And thank you, Peter, once again, for taking all the time to do it. Excellent presentation as usual. Anyone have any questions for the Commissioner or for Peter on the presentation?
Just first a comment that Peter and Joan, great job. I was at a meeting yesterday, and you and the governor were lauded about the Keene Valley bridge reconstruction, how fast that went. But the question I have, just interested in what caused the decision-making delays that went up to a year. If you had to just your best guess, why did it take so long to just make those decisions with the overruns?
There were a couple of different reasons, as Peter pointed out in his objective outside view, which I think was extremely important, as the governor directed that it be an outside set of eyes, and his team was terrific in identifying the issues. Some of them were tied to utility issues that were not part of the design. Some of it was tied to the maintenance and protection of traffic issues that we need to adhere to. But a lot of it boils down to opening the lines of communication between the project management staff, working with the contractors, and working with the utilities. Perfect example, when we had to get things done quickly after Hurricane Irene and Tropical Storm Lee, everybody stepped up to the plate, and nobody looked at doing it the old way. We did it the new way. So I think it's really changing that culture and not and opening those lines of communication. There will be unforeseen circumstances, but if we address them early on, it will significantly reduce delays and cost overruns.
Anyone have any other questions, comments? I think we've chatted about this before, but the attitude that you brought to this I thought was impressive and appropriate. We never said that we inherited a perfect government in January. Reinvention is an ongoing process. There's a lot of reform that needs to be done in this state government. There's a lot of efficiency to find, a lot of things to improve. So not getting defensive about situations where past practices haven't worked well. We're the first ones to say that's exactly right, and that's why we're here to make it better. So the ability to err and be honest and recognize a situation that hasn't gone well, and how do we learn from it, and how do we move on? So kudos to you, Joan. Peter, thank you very much again. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Howard Glazer and Matt Driscoll, who have been working diligently on the flood recovery task force and managing the flood recovery efforts across the administration. Howard, do you want to start?
Yes, thank you, Governor. It's been about 75 days since Hurricane Irene and Tropical Storm Lee hit the state. The media has departed those scenes, but people are still there working very hard to rebuild their communities over the long term. And the state has also been there with them throughout, as you promised in your visits, Governor, that we would continue to provide that support, particularly through our Upstate Recovery Team, which is led by Environmental Facilities Corporation President Matt Driscoll. They've been consistently across the state, including a recent series of visits over the last 10 days when many of the commissioners here deployed, and we once again appreciate the involvement of the whole government in doing so. Matt's going to have a series of updates. I just want to mention three things, important areas that we've been working on. First, in terms of roads and bridges, I think as we've talked about before, there were over 400 roads and bridges in the immediate aftermath of the storm that were closed on the state highway system. Within 10 days of Hurricane Irene, 170 of those had reopened. Within 10 days of Tropical Storm Lee, another 200 had opened. As of today, 98% of the roads and bridges have reopened, including today specifically 3 more roads out of the remaining 6 highways that are closed are opening in the counties of Herkimer, Ulster, and Schoharie. So only 3 highways left to open. There are additionally 3 bridges left, and then we will have completed our construction on the roads. And Matt will have a little more color to add to that. Agriculture has been a very critical area for us. Commissioner Albertine is not able to be with us today, but he has visited with many farms, and he's been working diligently to implement our Agriculture and Community Recovery Fund, which the governor announced back in September. To date, we've awarded funds to 353 farms. This is actually money in hands for 353 farms being used in soil and water districts to assist in rebuilding agricultural infrastructure, drainage, et cetera, to make sure that if there are other floodwaters that come through, it won't happen again. We've also made available $3 million for feed and produce replacement so that the farms could be reimbursed for the costs of the materials that were destroyed in order to feed their farm animals as well. And we have some other things we'll be announcing shortly regarding the farm community. Lastly, with respect to individuals, we have a number of programs. I just want to mention one of them that's been very successful. Governor, you announced the rebate program for appliances. Homeowners who had appliances destroyed, like refrigerators and washing machines, et cetera, those are big ticket items. We announced a rebate program that would cover up to 50% of the cost of replacement items. We've funded so far over 8,000 applications, totaling $7.1 million. A good chunk of that has gone to the southern tier, about probably 40% of the money has gone to the southern tier at this point, which really got whacked in a very large area, and that's gone for all kinds of appliances. So we'll be continuing on these efforts as we go through. Matt Driscoll is going to address a few different areas as well. Our focus now is business and getting the business community revitalized, housing, and as the winter comes up, making sure that housing is in place for individuals, and lastly, there remain some infrastructure projects that need help, and Matt's been the one that's been on the ground, and he'll take it from there.
Okay, thanks, Howard. Good afternoon, Governor and cabinet members. A few weeks ago, Governor Cuomo deployed the Upstate Storm Recovery Task Force throughout the state. We met with community and business leaders in the affected areas with really 2 goals in mind. First, to assess the critical short-term needs, and then second, to discuss long-term planning efforts for impacted communities. What we learned is that there are critical issues which required immediate attention. First, in housing. With the approaching winter, hundreds of New Yorkers are worried about sufficient housing as the cold weather arrives. Secondly, in business, how will these communities stabilize and revitalize their local communities and economies and rebuild their business centers? Infrastructure was on everyone's list. Repairing the damaged roads and bridges in order to restore the flow of transportation throughout the state and address critical infrastructure such as stream mitigation efforts. After the storm, the governor said that we would be there for New Yorkers to assist them in their long-term rebuilding and planning efforts, and we're going to keep that promise. On the housing front, as winter approaches, temporary housing for those families left homeless continues to be a critical issue. 229 storm victims and their families have been approved for HUD-compliant temporary housing units from FEMA. By next week, FEMA expects to have 130 more units on site, in addition to the 55 already located in the affected communities. Currently, over 1,000 New York families have been placed in other forms of temporary housing. FEMA says that one hurdle in getting these temporary homes to people has been the need for adequate power. They require 200 amp service. And that's why the Office of Emergency Management and the State Public Service Commission are coordinating with utility providers to expedite utility service for these units to meet FEMA standards at FEMA's expense. The state, through the DEC, through the State Department of Codes and State Office of Emergency Management, have been working with FEMA to enable these temporary units to be located safely in areas that were previously flooded. In addition, DOT has fast-tracked the permitting process for companies that haul these units to disaster survivors and sites and have waived the permitting fees. Access to heat, especially at this time of the year, is another significant concern. The governor is directing HCR and OTDA to allocate $5 million in funds to help repair and replace furnaces damaged as a result of Hurricane Irene and Tropical Storm Lee. This money will provide help to homeowners for their primary and permanent residences in 34 counties that have been declared eligible for disaster assistance and any that are subsequently added by the federal government. Up to $6,000 per applicant is available to households that qualify. Work will include repair or replacement of a furnace, boiler, or a hot water heater, repair or replace of ductwork, fuel tanks, venting systems, or other items essential to safe operation of heating systems. To address the short-term business needs, the governor and Homes and Community Renewal are making available up to $3 million for Main Street businesses in the hardest-hit counties throughout and through the New York State Agriculture and Community Recovery Fund. This new round of funding will aid in the rebuilding of small businesses and help jumpstart the local economies in these counties. Eligible businesses will be able to apply for assistance to, among other things, rehabilitation of buildings, repairs and replacement of permanent fixtures and equipment, and for inventory and working capital. And as you all know, infrastructure and ensuring the health and safety of the public was an immediate concern. This included making sure that the wastewater treatment facilities and drinking water facilities were operating in a safe and a reliable manner. At the governor's direction, the Environmental Facilities Corporation created the HELP Fund, which made $25 million available to communities affected by the storms. The funds will go towards repairing water systems damaged by storm-related flooding. So far, 14 municipalities in these 9 counties will receive a total of nearly $13 million in 5-year no-interest loan. This will cover expenses for repairs to pump stations, electrical equipment, treatment facilities, and other critical equipment needs. HELP loans can be repaid with FEMA funds, or they can be converted into long-term loans. As you know, many of our roadways and bridges were severely damaged or destroyed after the storms, and most, if not all, of these routes served as vital arteries providing safe passage to citizens across our state. Today, 98% of the roads and bridges that were damaged or destroyed by the storms are now fully functional. As Howard mentioned earlier, more than 400 road systems and bridges were closed on the state highway system. Within 10 days of Hurricane Irene, the state had reopened 170 of the 200 roads and bridges that were closed. Within 10 days of Tropical Storm Lee, New York reopened 200 more roads and bridges and continued work on the infrastructure that suffered the most extensive damage. And as was said, as of today, only 3 highways and 3 bridges remain closed. I want to show you a few more pictures, I think, that are really going to speak to the scope and challenge that was faced. And they do a cross-section of the impacted areas, as you can see at the top of the screen. And because of that, I'd like to just take a moment and illustrate really the incredible effort by DOT, because it took approximately 2,700 pieces of equipment for cleanup and repair. 2,400 maintenance staff were deployed, and it consumed about 200,000 man-hours during the 3-week response period. And I just wanted to say, Joan, to you and your staff, job well done. And now, as we look towards the long term, the governor wants communities to know that New York State is ready to continue to partner with them and to assist them as they plan for the long term. Our Department of State houses expert planners and professional facilitators who can support local communities as they consider a long-term vision for their recovery. Today, I'm pleased to report to you that the local officials across the state have been very responsive with this technical support provided by the state of New York. Governor, that concludes my report, and I will turn it back to Howard.
Thank you very much, Matt. There still remains work to be done, and there are people in need. The governor mentioned the holiday season is coming. Thanksgiving is coming upon us, and I just want to remind our commissioners and our senior staff that we established a recovery fund that takes donations in conjunction with the United Way of New York State, and that fund is making its grants, but they still have a need. And so if you find the time, you might want to send a check over to the United Way of New York State, made out to the Hurricane Irene Recovery Fund, or if it's easier, you can pay by credit card and go online to uwnys.org and access the PayPal link. I invite the commissioners, our senior staff, and of course the press is welcome as well to support our effort. Thank you very much, Governor.
Soliciting of the cabinet, I don't even know that meets all the standards. Any questions on the flood recovery? Really great job, though. And Joe and the DOT staff, you know, what people forget, when you look at the string of extraordinary weather conditions that we've had, DOT, people haven't gotten a break. You know, you went from Irene to Lee to one of the earliest snowfalls ever, trees down all over the state in the affected areas. So they have really been doing extraordinary work. And Matt and Darrell have really followed up, and it's going very well. With that, let me turn it over to open it up to the press for any questions on these presentations, or any question for me. Jimmy?
Mr. Driscoll, or perhaps Mr. Glazer, do we have an updated dollar amount for the total amount of damage and the total amount of state liability related to tropical storms Irene and Lee?
I think the total amount of damage will be, you know, within the original number the governor put out, $1 billion or so. With regards to the state's share of that, it's hard to know until the end of the day because, for example, the DOT projects are significantly reimbursed by the federal government, 90% reimbursed by the federal government at the end of the process when it's all accounted for. So we have to go through that reconciliation before we'll have a final number in terms of what the state actually has to pay out.
On Occupy Wall Street, I guess two questions. One, your reaction to Mayor Bloomberg's actions taken the other night, and also your reaction to David Soares not prosecuting those arrested here in Albany who have trespassed on state land.
You know, Ken, I support Mayor Bloomberg's actions. He called me that evening, that night, I guess, maybe even early that morning, and told me about the actions he was taking on Occupy Wall Street. I told him at that time that I support his actions. I said any way that the state could be of service, we would be. He hasn't requested any assistance, but I told him I did offer assistance and support. I support, Ken, the actions of all of our mayors. And interestingly, different mayors have taken different actions. And have devised different strategies or evolved to different strategies in different areas. So Buffalo is taking one track, Binghamton another, Rochester yet another, Albany yet another, and Mayor Bloomberg obviously in Manhattan, Zuccotti Park. So my position is I support all localities' decisions and the mayor's decisions in those localities. And Mayor Bloomberg, I did that explicitly. I understand the district attorney's position here. It's less than ideal, but I understand it, and we'll continue to monitor the situation here.
Is the special prosecutor?
Is there any possibility in Occupy Albany that you might appoint a special prosecutor to take over these cases?
You know, as I said, it's a less than ideal situation, but at this time, we'll just continue to monitor it.
Governor, what do you think of some of the critics, the AFL-CIO among them, who are characterizing you as sticking up for the quote-unquote 1% and the banks and so forth rather than the protesters?
Yeah, I'm sticking up for the people of the state of New York. That's what I get paid to do, and that's my job, and that's what I'm doing.
Governor, how is it logically consistent to support a mayor who allows people who are occupying a public park and then say you also support a mayor who's refusing to do that?
Because I think, Fred, these are local decisions. And I respect the locality's right to make a decision that they think is most appropriate in their case. And you have different decisions and different facts. You know, Zuccotti Park was one set of circumstances. It was a private park. The mayor felt that it was also a high density of people. The mayor felt that there was a possibility for danger. So I understand the state's role and where the state knows best and assert the state's jurisdiction. I also respect local governments, and I think this is a decision that is appropriately made by the local official on site. So I supported Mayor Bloomberg. I support the other mayors who have different opinions. In Albany, where the situation got complicated in Albany was the city administration, the mayor, chose a different course than the one that was originally discussed. That's okay too, but to the extent there was some confusion, that's what started it.
Just to follow up John McLaughlin's question, is there any chance that you might name a special prosecutor in Albany if the DA continues to refuse to prosecute these cases?
We'll continue to monitor it at this point, Fred. We'll just continue to monitor it. No, that's my answer. You may not like my answer, but that is my answer. This is a less than ideal situation, and we are taking no action now. We will continue to monitor the situation, meaning depending on what develops, we may change our position. I am monitoring the situation. You could say, I use my words, you can use your words. Your words wind up in a newspaper, which gives them a greater import than my words.
Did you make any recommendations prior to being told of what Mayor Bloomberg was going to do? Did you have any discussions with him?
No.
Did you make any? So you made no recommendations on how to handle it?
No.
Governor, do you believe you have the legal authority to appoint a special prosecutor? There was some question raised by former Attorney General Dennis Stocco, who was last appointed in a similar situation.
Yeah, we'll continue to monitor it, Jimmy, and we'll cross that bridge if we come to it.
The state police will continue to make arrests of curfew violators at Lafayette Park
Yes.
for the foreseeable future?
Yes.
How are you going to handle tomorrow? There's apparently the busloads of people, again, involving the unions as well as the Wall Street protesters are going to be coming to Albany, and they're going to be doing some sort of demonstration in the Capitol.
How long have you been in Albany? Have you ever seen busloads of people come to Albany before? This is unfortunately not a new or novel situation for us.
If I could direct it to Mr. D'Amico, at least 20 state troopers have been on scene in Lafayette Park Saturday, Sunday, Monday evenings to deal with these demonstrators. I'm wondering what effect that has had on your ability to police Troop G, Zone 4, and wondering if there's any overtime cost or any additional cost associated with these actions.
Well, obviously, we pull resources from other places to the police department. As far as overtime, we've been trying to work around paying overtime to the troopers, so we've done some of these items. And it's unfortunate that maybe other areas, suffer with less troopers. We just think it's important that we maintain the law and orders related to the demonstrations that are happening in the park.
How many officers have been reassigned, Superintendent?
It varies on a daily basis. I don't have it.
Do you feel that you're able to adequately perform your law enforcement needs in the rest of the area with those officers reassigned?
We wouldn't compromise our ability to provide these services to any community. So if we had to pay overtime, we would take it up overtime.
And Superintendent, how much?
Excuse me one second, Mr. McLaughlin. Just so we're clear, this happens routinely. Now, if we have busloads of people coming up, the superintendent is going to need to call out another 20 state troopers. By the way, during the last session, there were many, many times that we had an abundance of state troopers. We had thousands and thousands of people all through the building. When that happens, you have to call out numerous troopers to deal with the situation. And this has gone on for decades. So this is nothing new. I'm sorry, John.
But this is the first time, Governor, you say it's nothing new. It's the first time in my memory where a DA will not prosecute these arrests.
That is different. Yes, that is different. That's why we're monitoring. There's no doubt about it. That's new. But from our point of view, this is regular. This is fairly routine.
Have how you're going to close the budget deficit. Your budget office gave a number of options this week. Have you decided which ones to choose?
We were going to think about renting out the LCA room upstairs. We think we could get significant rental income. We are, you know, Karen, I said when we put out the numbers that this is not just another budget estimate or budget update or revenue update that we do periodically, because you're getting near the period where you need to make real decisions. So my concern was, because there's volatility in the economy, there's volatility in the market, there's volatility in the world, I wanted to make sure we had the best numbers, and before they get cast in stone and then people start to react to the numbers, and then if the numbers are incorrect, we could have gone down the wrong track. I am still at that point. I understand the numbers that we put out. I've said all along the estimates and the numbers are grim. We'll wait for the next several weeks to see what information we get. When you get near December, Karen, Wall Street firms are starting to do their bonuses and announce their bonuses. That is relevant information for us to make a determination. So we'll get more information as we go on, especially as we get closer to December. At one point, based on that information, you have to start to make real decisions because you're looking at January. Also, the exercise that we're going through is somewhat different than your question would suggest. We don't see this as a budget exercise. This is not about closing a gap in a budget. Frankly, this is worse than that. This is a significant economic slowdown for this state, which mirrors what's happening nationwide. And the real question for us as the administration is, how do you help, how do you create private sector jobs? And how does the state do that? And how do you jumpstart this economy? That is a far more profound and difficult question than how do you close a budget gap? And that's the question that we're focusing on. That's the question that I'm focusing on. It is more of an economist's question than a budget question, if you will. But that's where I'm spending my time, and that's where we are spending our time.
Close the budget gap too? And you're waiting for more information. Do you think the news will get any better as you wait?
Well,
What do you expect?
the budget gap, when you talk, there are two budget gaps, right? There's this year and next year. This year is a $350 million gap. It is, you know, 100 million here, 100 million there, so when you're talking about real money. That is an issue. But we're also getting towards January that raises a larger question, which is the quote-unquote budget for next year. And we're looking at both of these issues because they're both linked, you know. It's a budget question. If a business says we have a shortfall this month and we have a problem making payroll, that is a budget question. Short term, how does the business find the money to cover the payroll that month? If the business says our product isn't selling, our retailers are returning the product, that is more than a short-term budget problem. That is a fundamental issue for the business plan and the economics of the business. We have an economics problem more than we have a budget problem. How do you close a budget gap of $3 billion? How do you close a budget gap of $350 million? Those are relatively easy questions. How do you jumpstart the state's economy? How do you create thousands of jobs at a time when the national economy is going against you? That's a much more difficult question, but frankly, that's the relevant question. And that's what we're focusing on.
When will you be releasing your revenue forecast?
I'm sorry?
When will you be releasing the revenue forecast?
When is the next revenue forecast? Do you know, Bob?
The report
this Monday, which was the mid-year report. The next report that's due is the executive budget.
Governor, going back to your favorite topic, if you
I'm
could-
sorry, excuse me one second, Eric. There isn't, what Bob is saying is there... Consensus forecast?
There's a quick start report that is required for us to work on with the legislature. We're waiting for the legislature to release all of their reports on the mid-year now that our report is out. And so we have to wait until that happens and see what they're saying.
Let me say this also, Carrie. I'm slightly amused by the questions about, well, you're not following all the rules set up by the budget process to get a budget on time, when, by the way, the rules never got a budget on time, right? But the concept of working closely with the legislature so that you can hopefully facilitate a budget on time, that we are doing, and that we have been doing. One of the successes of last year was a productive working relationship with the legislature, and that exists today. So all these devices, quick start for the budget process, which is probably an oxymoron in the first place. We are working very closely with the Senate and the Assembly. We're talking almost on a daily basis about the numbers, about the projections, about the possibilities. Again, my emphasis is not just about how do we close 350, how do we close 3.5, how do we get the state's economy running, which may or may not include a short-term budget issue. I'm sorry, Eric.
Wearing your hat as the head of the state's Democratic Party, would you consider supporting a Democratic challenger to David Soares next year?
Can I answer a political question in this building, or do I get zapped by some? I don't. Call me on my private bat phone, my Democratic bat phone, and I'll answer that question.
Governor, with respect to the deficit, we all know your position on the millionaire's tax. So
Are you sure you do? I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
changed from last week. But would you, in your budget proposal, consider any revenue raisers, beyond just casino gambling expansion, possible revenue from hydrofracking? Has there been any revenue raisers talked about?
Nick, I don't want to start to play the what-if games. Somebody was asking me the other day, well, is it still 4% increase for education? Might you reduce education? Might you do this? Let's get the numbers. Let's look at the numbers. Let's get the information. Let's develop a plan, and let's do it that way rather than posing potential hypotheticals that could go on an endless basis, frankly. One last...
Federal court today vacated the conviction of Joe Bruno, but left open the possibility of him being retried. What's your opinion on this? Do you think he should be retried? Do you think the matter should be dropped?
I don't, I would leave that up to the U.S. Attorney, Yancey. I don't think it's my place to comment.
Okay, I'm going to ask the media to leave as the governor concludes the cabinet meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much.